I am going to start making content more seriously now. I like the idea of who I can become by making this content. I don't really want to be famous, to be honest, but I see the pros outweigh the cons. And I'm looking forward to becoming the kind of person that can speak more clearly, that can communicate effectively in all realms of my life. I want to be able to portray stories. I love storytelling. That's kind of what excites me about pursuing this now. I kind of want to just share about my journey, my business journey, maybe parts of my spiritual and personal journey as well. But I really want to create a community, a way to put out content to people, because I feel like I've experienced a lot of peace, a lot of joy, a lot of hardships, a lot of learning, a lot of wisdom. I've had good mentors in my life, so many good things, and I feel selfish when I don't share that. But I work a lot. I can't just go and talk to people all the time. So I wanted a way where I could share what I'm learning so that you don't have to go through the same problems. You don't have to struggle the same way. I want to be able to suffer through something and share it with you, just like many people have done for me. So that's my intention. It's going to be a lot about my business, where I'm at. I'm going to talk briefly here about my vision for the company. I'm going to talk about why I'm building it. I want to talk about what I'm building it to be, my vision. I got a lot of ideas, and it's tough. So I want to talk about the reality of building a business, the reality of not even just business, but taking something that's up here and turning it into a reality, what that process looks like, why it's difficult, things I've struggled, and the things I'm learning. So I hope that you get some value from this. I have nothing to sell. I just want to share what I'm learning and hope that you can learn something from it. So enjoy. I'm going to start with something that's been on my mind recently, something that caused me a lot of mental harm. I guess harm's not the right word. Something that's I've dragged myself through the mud in my brain way more than I should have for this. And it's that the industry that I'm in, upholstery, is a dying trade, is what many people call it. But it's not dying in all ways, because the demand is there. In fact, the demand is growing every year. What most people see as a dying trade, I see as an opportunity. And the thing that excites me the most, the reason I feel like I'm not growing as fast as I could, is because I chose an industry, and this is not an excuse, but I chose an industry that has no standards. So when we talk about standards, we think of, or just think of an auto repair shop. If I wanted to go get my car repaired, say I'm driving, check engine light comes on, where do you go? Immediately I think I need to find an auto repair shop. I know I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna talk to a salesman who's gonna build me an estimate, but then the tech is gonna fix my car at the allotted time. You know, they probably have a deposit up front or something, and I know that that's how those auto shops work. You could say the same thing for retail stores. You could say the same thing for restaurants. Restaurants, there's a standard, there's a system in a lot of ways, where I walk into the restaurant most of the time, right? I'm gonna have a hostess or host walk up to me, seat me where they need me to sit or whatever, or sometimes they'll ask me where I want to sit. I can choose a table. They give me time to get my drinks first, and then they come back 5 minutes later to get food, and then they bring the food, and then right after they bring the food, they ask how my service was. There's like, you almost know what you're gonna get. Now with the upholstery industry, they don't have that. There is no standard way of how shops operate. Now there's a lot of shops, and there's a lot of independent shops that are doing phenomenal, and there's a lot of independent shops that are struggling a lot. If you know what upholstery is, you know this. But that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build the standard. There's no way to price. Let's take another example here. Think of a story, right? Super basic example. If I go to the same breakfast restaurant every morning, I know what they charge. I know when I walk into any breakfast restaurant, could be the one I go to every day or not, I'm gonna get roughly this price for breakfast. When I go into an auto repair shop, I know roughly it's gonna cost this much. Now, it depends on your knowledge of expertise and everything like that, but when I go somewhere, there's a way that they price them, and there's kind of a standard around it, right? Let's say, for example, if you are an auto shop owner and you're a mechanic, you repair cars for a living, there's a standard to how those things work. So I like cars, I think about cars, and it's very similar to the business model I'm trying to build, so that's what I'm gonna use as an example. Auto repair shop over here they've got a standard on processes, on how to do things. They've got a standard on sales, how do they sell the services that they offer. They've got a shop setup, manager, a technician, service advisor, things like that, right? And they've got all of these standards and processes and supporting companies to build that. So for example, let's take the processes, right? The labor processes. So there's book time, right? So the way that auto shops can unlock that book time is by having flat rate jobs or book time jobs, right? And if you don't know how that works, basically it's if a job is estimated to be completed in 8 hours of manual labor and the technician can complete that same job in 6 hours, that 2-hour delta is where the profit can be made. And so that's how a lot of auto shops can have that exponential profit, is by having technicians systems who are good enough to be able to create that delta, as well as parts markups, and they've got other things, but that's kind of like a base way that they operate, right? Now, on the upholstery shop side of things, there isn't that. Now, there are some canned jobs or things you'd see all the time where you can kind of set standard pricing for, and that's awesome, but there's no standard for most things, right? Go into an auto shop again. A starter goes out. Well, on this exact vehicle during this year, make, and model, and it's going to cost this much for the starter and this much for the lathe. Now, an auto upholstery shop, you might walk in and say, hey, my 1966 Mustang needs a new interior. Well, an auto shop over here, an auto shop over here, an auto shop here, they're going to have completely different ways about going about how to build the estimate. They're going to have completely different ways of types of materials, suppliers, the way that the work is actually done once it's in the shop. So there's no standard. So you can get varying prices, varying quality of work. And that's the other thing about upholstery shops. I'll get into this later, but the quality of the work, the standard, the brand is so different. Where with auto shops, it's easier to find an auto shop that's more reputable because they've got systems in place for Google reviews and referrals from customers and marketing and things of that sort, usually, right? On the upholstery shop side of things, they don't have that, right? There's very few shops out there in comparison who do marketing, who have systems in place to create jobs, to sell jobs, to upsell, to kind of have that margin, if you will. Now, we talked about the labor processes. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but it'll come together. So those labor processes on the auto shop, they have that delta where book time work, right? Where 8 hours for this job, but you do it in 6, you make the cheese, right? You make that little bread. Now, on the upholstery shop, there isn't that. So, for example, how most upholstery shops will bid jobs will be time and material. Very standard, very basic way of bidding things. Now, I will look at this Mercedes behind me and I'll say, all right, it needs, this fix, and this fix. Okay, well, I don't know, 20 hours. That's what I think it's gonna take. Oh, wait, no, actually, there's this piece and that, so 40 hours. That's what it's going to be. 40 hours at our shop rate, and then, if you need materials or something, we'll throw that in. That's kind of not a great way of doing it, because what if this takes me 80 hours to get done? What if it takes me 10 hours to get done, right? It's like there's so many different jobs where by trying to base something off of just how much I think it's going to take without having seen the job before, right? A technician at an auto shop could see a vehicle that he's never seen before, ever, and he could get book time for how long this job's supposed to take, what the job is, and it has how-tos on everything, and he could get that job done probably less than the allotted time the first time he's seen that car. At the upholstery shop, there is no system, there is no standard, there is no book time, there is no, hey, this is going to take this amount of time. So much so that the actual manual process of what you do once that's in the shop varies wildly between shops. Well, how do you fix this? Well, there's a couple ways. In some things, let's say, for example, placing a convertible top. Let's say we're doing carpet replacements, stuff like that, where you might have a little bit more standard, right? Convertible tops often is about one of the only things in the upholstery industry that has a labor time where I can go and find, hey, this should take 12 hours. One of the only things. In terms of seats, recovering, doing the actual upholstery, nothing. How can we fix this, right? Well, I got to thinking. Manually, each time I do a seat, I've got to take off the cover, cut apart each piece, pattern each of those pieces onto new material, and I got to be super precise. I got to make sure I trace that perfectly. And then I've got to cut that new material perfectly. And then I've got to sew that new material together perfectly, right? So a lot of skill. It's not hard per se, but it takes skill. It takes an eye for detail, and that's great. But at a mass scale, which is what I envision, is a nationwide company. I envision setting the standard for the industry. I'm not talking setting the standard for Montrose, Colorado, where I live. I'm talking about the industry. I'm talking about the nation. Well, how do you make something that repeatable, that makes sense, that helps people, that you can charge more for because you're doing it more efficiently and effectively, faster turnaround? How do you go about that? I started thinking about, we kind of live in an age of machines and AI and all of these things. How can I utilize this as we grow? Because this is going to be a long time, 10, 15 years, maybe. I don't know how long it'll take. Hopefully 5, but I don't think that's going to happen. 10 years into this business. So AI is going to continue growing. Machines are going to continue growing. Technology is going to get better and better. Well, what makes sense? So I got to thinking about, what if I could walk into a medical office office, say a dental office. Let's say I've got a dentist chair that I want to recover, right? The material's getting old, or the dentist just wants a kind of a refresh, and he can't have the downtime. You know, that's super important, especially for medical professionals, is downtime. Well, how do you reduce that? For restaurants, medical professionals, boats, cars, all of these things. Let's take this dentist chair, for example. What if I walked in and immediately I can get a 3D scanner and I can scan this upholstery, convert that into a CAD file, lay out all my patterns based off the scan, and CNC cut them, and then before a trimmer even sees it, and the dentist chair is still in the office, take that and bring, once the CNC cuts the material, the trimmer will take that, sew the pieces together, and let's say you've got a delivery truck at this point. Think of like a plumber van, but maybe it's a box truck, and you've got a table, an air compressor, a little sewing machine, stuff like that inside of this box truck. That guy goes out to the dentist's office, goes inside for 15 minutes, takes off the pieces of the dental chair, brings it out to the box truck, unstaples, and staples the new covers on, because they've already been cut, pattern cut, and sewn before it's even reached the dentist office. And then inside that box truck, you've got a little sewing machine, you've got some patterning, you've got some extra material and miscellaneous tools and stuff, so that if there's any adjustments or things that need to be made on site, boom, real quick, you can get it done. Now, not only are you having your trimmer spend less time on the job, you've got efficiency, you've got faster turnaround, boom, second thing that can add profit, and then you've also got increased production, how much you can do. Your trimmer, now that he's more efficient, he can also be more productive, because now instead of having to spend copious amounts of time just manually patterning and cutting every single thing, now you've got one guy who can just sew this, go install it. Now you could have 5-6 jobs backed up for him to sew that have already been cut and digitized and everything. Now you need a lot less people, and you can get about 3-4 times the efficiency out of one trimmer. I mean, think about that. And then you could have apprentices go out on those delivery trucks and do just unstaple and staple the new stuff. You know, maybe they need some training, some experience, but you're now increasing efficiency, productivity, turnaround time, and just the service that you provide overall. I mean, that alone, think about that for restaurants, medical centers. Think about that for cars. Think about scanning an entire boat interior, scanning it, having the entire system in CAD, being able to cut and sew every single panel on the boat interior before the boat goes in the shop. By the time the boat comes in the shop, you have a team that goes in, unstaples everything, and staples the new covers on. You could have a full boat interior turned around in what, 2 days? Yeah, I'm gonna be freaking rich. This is awesome. Genius. Anyway, we'll see how much of this I feel like posting, but at the same time, I don't know if people would see it or if it'd be a competitive advantage. Regardless, it's a phenomenal idea. I mean, people would figure it out anyways, right? So something I want to talk about is I'm building an industry in a way. Turning an industry around, bringing it from its knees to its feet. Now, I don't have 30-40 years of experience in business or in upholstery, but I don't need that. I need people who know what they're doing. And my job is to kind of cast this vision and to kind of organize things to assemble to create that vision. The more research that I do, the more I see that this is a possibility, this industry. You know, revival. I don't know what the right word would be. Refresh, revival, revitalize, something. And it excites me because I get to build something. You know, it's cool. And the more I listen to guys like Alex Hormozy, he always talks about, you know, you need good people on your team. You need people who know what they're doing, have the experience that you don't have. And it's tough for me as a young entrepreneur right now, when I'm so new, I just don't know anything about anything, is what it feels like. And I'm trying to just pay my ignorance debt as fast as possible, because it sucks not knowing things. It sucks sucking things. It's like, how can I continue to pay this ignorance debt? And how can I continue to get better, faster, smarter, stronger people around me where I don't have to know everything? Right? Because I want to win. That's my goal. But I don't want to win by causing somebody else to lose. And that is a falsely purported fake perspective. I think that you win by helping others, right? Now, can you win by making others fail? Sure, we see guys who scam people and stuff, but the reality is they always get caught. They always get what's coming to them. And if they don't, do you really want to be that guy who lives with that? I mean, honestly. So put that to the side. I want to win, and I want people around me who want to win. I don't have to be right. My dad always said this, he still says it. You can either be right or you can have what you want. You can either be right or you can have a good marriage. You can either be right or you can have a profitable business. You can either be right or you can have good people work for you. You can either be right or you can have good friendship. And so the point of this saying is sometimes you have to humble yourself in order to be able to learn. In order to get what you actually want, I have to accept I don't know what the answer is. And that's tough sometimes. And you know what I'm talking about. It's tough sometimes. But I think the number one contributor that has gotten me to where I am today, and this is not me bragging because it's all perspective, but the number one contributor that's got me to where I am today is humility. It's that I'm willing to admit that I don't know something. And I could say it's from this or it's from that or I don't know. I know growing up, I wasn't really liked in schools and whatever, right? And I had a weird upbringing, as we all have, right? As you have too. It's weird, right? I was like the class joker in school. I loved to make jokes, so I got like rejected, I got made fun of a lot. Not in like a oh pity me way, but like because of that, I now have this skill of not giving a shit, and it's awesome. And so now, because I don't give a shit, I can be in front of a whole group of people who I respect and want to look good in front of, and I can say, man, I don't know, can you explain that to me? Because I don't care, because I want to win more than I want to be right, because I want to win more than I want to look cool. So do you want to win more than you want to look cool? Do you want to win more than you want to be right? Honestly, ask yourself that. And if you're like, well, yeah, I do, but I'm not really winning yet, I would ask, do your actions align with your interests? Do your actions align with who you say you want to be? And if that struck something in you, think about that for a while. Think about why that is. Why do you not respect yourself enough to follow through and be a man or woman of integrity? Think about that. Integrity is when you say you're going to do something that you stick with, right? Sticking to your word, being a man of your word. Right? So I want to say that because I wanted to say this. Stop seeking validation, seek fulfillment. Sometimes the most selfless thing you can do is to focus on yourself. Now I'm going to say that again. Stop seeking validation, seek fulfillment. Sometimes the most selfless thing you can do is to focus on yourself solely. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not sitting up here and saying, I'm saying this from a place of authority, I've never struggled with this. I absolutely struggle with this. A lot of me talking to you right now is talking to me and my younger self, and even me right now, and future me, when this seeking validation is just so destructive. If you do this, you know, most likely. And if you don't know, ask yourself, when in your life do you value somebody saying you are something more than you actually being that thing? I'll say for my example, I often have missed the gym for days or a couple weeks at a time. Not proud of it, but I did. But when I was talking to people and they were like, oh yeah, this guy, he goes to the gym every day, I felt better. I was like, yeah, that's right, but I had this guilt inside of me because I knew that I was skipping the gym. I knew that I chose sleep. I chose to be lazy oftentimes instead of going in and putting in the work like I said I was going to. But I allowed myself to be okay with the fact that they thought I was going to the gym every day. Is that right? Is that wrong? That's not who I wanted to be, right? So I would ask yourself, are you being who you want to be? I mean, honestly, we could put masks on the things that we do and say, well, yeah, and this is the reason why I'm like this or that. Do you really want to label yourself like that? That's what labeling is. You are saying, oh, that thing, that's me. Really? It sounds like silly, and I struggle with this too. This is not a place of authority, but like, I used to say I have ADHD. I used to say it's hard for me to focus. Genuinely, that's what I believed through middle school, through high school. When I dropped out of high school, that's what I told myself, that's what I told everybody else, that's what my parents had said, that's what teachers and all this stuff. But the reality is, I could look back on that situation and say I had ADHD, and that is why I did or did not do this thing. Or I could take accountability for my actions and I could say, I did not know how to focus. I did not have the skill of focus, and I didn't have anything I wanted to focus on. The big turning point for me was this. I started to realize I like cars. And so I started to realize when I'm looking into my cars, when I'm upgrading my personal vehicle, when I'm doing research for something I think is cool, like a cool car that I want to buy one day, or a part that I want to upgrade on my car, right? I was fascinated by it. I would spend 2 hours looking into something and the ups and the downs that come with it, and how to do it properly, and what other supporting modifications do I need to do there. And I was just infatuated by it. Well, I was focused at that point. So did my ADHD just go away for that 2-hour segment? Or did I find something I was passionate about and I learned how to focus? Now, it's a lot easier to learn how to focus when it's something you love. But as I've continued to learn and to grow, I've learned the value in focusing on things that I don't necessarily love, because it will bring me closer to what I want, if that makes sense. Another example, I went to a trade school to learn basically automotive, all things automotive, right? So how to mechanic, how to transmissions, like chassis, like you name it, like welding, street rod. We did like custom metal fabrication, we did chassis building, all this stuff. And there was multiple times in those classes where they were teaching something that I did not care. I was like, this is stupid. I was like, this is never gonna help me. I don't know what I'm gonna need this for. But I was so fascinated by cars and just, I thought they were so cool that I was like, regardless, I wanna learn everything I could. I wanna learn everything I can about cars because I want to know this because it's going to help me in all other areas. I want to understand how an automatic transmission works, how the hydraulics pump fluid through the system in order to get everything to work the way it needs to. I was like, I want to understand how does that work. Instead, I shifted my focus where instead of me being like, I don't like this subject, you know, let's say it was, I don't like automatic transmission. I don't know, they were difficult to understand, maybe, right? I could look at that, or I could say, man, it is fascinating. How does hydraulics work so intricately with all of these like designs and cut pieces and like spinning parts and drums and like, how does this stuff, that's fascinating. Like, how does that metal somehow mesh just like that perfectly and it doesn't like shred it apart? And so I got so fascinated by that I passed that class basically with perfect grades. And I had this deep, and I still do have this deep understanding of how it works, because I was like, I wanted to be fascinated by how things work, because if I understand how things work, I can reverse engineer other things. But I say all of that to say that I did not like learning automatic transmissions, but it didn't matter because I wanted the skill of understanding vehicles as a whole. And so to get me closer to what I wanted, I looked at something I didn't necessarily like, that I wasn't passionate about, but I knew that if I knew this, it would get me closer to what I wanted. And so I learned the skill of focus, and I changed my perspective. Instead of I need to learn automatic transmissions, I want to understand so intimately how this works because it'll get me closer to this. And I did that with every class, right? And I had my ups and my downs, but I passed with basically perfect attendance and honors and all that good stuff. So where in your life are you not focusing? Where in your life are you labeling yourself with something that takes you from who you could be? Because the hardest thing we can do as people is confront who we could be. You know how hard it is to say, I could be a multimillionaire right now, but I chose to sleep in and that's on me. That is tough. It's so much easier to make excuses and say, oh, well, I could have done that, but you know, that guy, he was lucky, you know. He was lucky. He just had better mentors. You know, that's what it was. You know, he just, you know, he got a lucky industry. You know, he already had a standard built for his industry, right? Like, it was easier for him. You know, I got this industry, right? It's like, really? I chose this life. You chose your life with the actions that you made. Think about that. You're the product of your actions. Now, you can either take responsibility or you can continue with labels and, you know, this person's fault, that person's fault, blaming, shaming. Is that going to get you closer to who you want to be and what you want to do, though? That is part one. We'll see. I'd like to do these weekly. Not sure how often I'll do these. Got a lot going on with the business and shared a little bit earlier, so we'll see how it goes. If you get any value from this at all, I have no idea, so please let me know. If you're like, hey, I hate you, I probably won't listen to you. But if you're like, hey, you know, this is maybe not as valuable as I thought it could be, maybe if you did this or that, open to feedback. But anyways, stay true to yourself, stay true to God, and don't make any excuses.